Do you ever hear lyrics or maybe read a prayer that says something that you wanted to say but you didn't have the words for? You ever have that happen? You read these prayers. I like reading ancient prayers. And you read these prayers and you think to yourself, that's what I meant. Why couldn't I say that? I encountered one of those prayers this week. It was written by a man by the name of Henry Nouwen, a Dutch mystic, you might say, a Catholic priest. But here's what he wrote. This has been my prayer this week. I receive an email every day from a website that gives me a thought from the day from now on. And when I saw this prayer, I wrote it on a series of Post-it notes and I stuck it on my desk, right where my computer sits. And I've been praying this prayer all week. Dear God, I so much want to be in control. I want to be the master of my own destiny. Still, I know that you are saying, let me take you by the hand and lead you. Accept my love and trust that where I will bring you, the deepest desires of your heart will be fulfilled. So now, Lord, open my hands to receive your gift of love. Amen. Isn't that beautiful? I want so much to be in control. As the overused poem Invictus says, I want to be the master of my own fate. As the overused Frank Sinatra song says, I did it my way. And as much as we recognize in our spirit that that is not the Christian ideal, there's still something in us that continually goes back to control. What I am in control of. I like being in control. I have remote controls in abundance. And I like holding on to them. I like being in control. It presents a problem in our house often because Dana and I do not like the same programs. She likes things that they call reality TV that are unrealistic. She likes those things. She likes the baking shows. She likes the shows that have high drama that is supposedly unscripted. I like shows that tend to fall in two extremes. I like them where they're hurting other people. Or the shows that make me pause every 10 minutes to think about what was said. Right? I like those kinds of shows. And so, for the most part, I control the TV because I can't stomach the other, and Dana can't stomach mine. And so, the secret to a happy marriage is 2 TVs. So maybe we should get another TV. So anyway. Right, but we like this idea of control, don't we? I mean, we know in our head that it's not the Christian standard. And there are things we are given control of, and we need to take responsibility for. So I'm not talking about an uncontrolled, ungoverned, undisciplined life. I'm talking about our manic need to control the world around us so that everyone sees things the way that I see things. We go back to this constantly. And here's what I've discovered in my life, is that when I impose my control on the people around me, I find myself requiring that same level of control for the God that I serve. I want God to be under control in my life. Now, if I were to be honest in those moments, I would recognize that, no, I don't want God constrained to my way of thinking. I recognize that fallacy, yet I keep going back to this like a dog returning to its vomit. Am I the only one? We have control issues, don't we? Just last night, this is not in my notes, just last night, I was sitting in my chair and there were 2 magnets. My kids have these oblong magnetic stones, and they were somehow on my end table. And so I was playing with them, and I was slouched down in my chair, right? And one of those magnets fell right on my chest. And all of a sudden, we heard this weird beeping sound. And I'm looking around like, what is going off? Dana and I are both looking for our phones. Turns out that magnet had shut off my pacemaker. And the sound was coming out of my body. It was why no matter where I went, the sound was there, but I could never find it. It was the weirdest thing, right? And the comment was made, can I get more of those magnets? Control. Right? This is the prayer that I ran into, and it convicted me, and I've been praying this all week long, and it's amazing how quickly I pray the prayer and then fall right back into the same tendencies. Almost instantly. It's so frustrating. But do you hear what God says in this prayer? He's speaking to us. Accept my love and trust that where I will bring you, the deepest desires of your heart will be fulfilled. Do you know that you don't know what you want? You think you know what you want, but you don't know. Sometimes what we think we want is the thing that is most immediate, most present on our mind. I'm talking about the desires of your life. You know, those transitory things, those momentary things that dominate our life. Those thoughts that sneak up and sneak in on you at your most vulnerable moments. I'm talking about something deeper. I'm talking about those desires that are almost impossible to put words to, and even more impossible to speak about with others. Have you ever tried to express something inexpressible? That's what a sermon is. Every week, that's what a sermon is. But it's this, we know it in our gut, these deep longings, that ache. I do this with movies sometimes. Or books, I enjoy sometimes that angst of something unsettled because it speaks to something unsettled in my life, something deep, something that can't be touched by the moment, something that can't be satiated by the next thing. So if we strip away all of these perfunctory things in our life and the immediate concerns of our day, what are we left with? What are these desires that God says He will meet? Imagine for a moment that you are financially secure, your kids are healthy and untroubled. Now, scratch that off the list. But this is a work in imagination. I'm being glared at. This is a work of fictional imagination. So imagine that you are financially secure, your kids are healthy and untroubled, your grandkids are doing what they should be doing and pursuing the right paths, your health is good and untroubled, and life appears to be in control in every aspect. Even your marriage is stable, and your relationships are healthy and productive. Your job is satisfying, and you are exactly in the place you thought you'd always be. You're all looking at me like, you're an idiot. I know, but this is an exercise in imagination. So imagine all of that is there. Imagine that is there. Pretend for a moment that all of those things, all of those momentary desires are satisfied. What is left? Because in our soul, we know something is still missing. It's that deep part. You see, when we speak of the deepest desires of our heart, we are looking for those unutterable longings that we spend most of our time covering up with everything else. Most of those longings that we spend the majority of our life trying to ignore and forget. It is the ache that is so present in your life that it becomes a part of who you are. Like back pain. You're not thinking about it, but it's there. And even when you're not thinking about it, you're thinking about it. It is the emptiness that is never quite filled, but is often hidden by all the other parts of our life. It is the angst of recognizing that no matter how much we have been given, there is always still something missing. This is what Nouwen means by the deepest desires of our heart. Do not hear this prayer and think, if I pray this prayer, God's going to give me what I want. The prayer is, I will give you the deepest desires of your heart. A part of our life that sometimes we don't even know, but that God does. Do you feel the angst? Most of you recognize what I'm talking about, and I've tried to put words to. If you don't know it intuitively, if you've not experienced it, just wait. It will come, that unsettled uncertainty of your life. So many years ago, more than I care to admit to at this point, how did things happen that I tell stories now that are decades old? It's a little disconcerting. But many years ago, 2 decades ago, I was visiting my sister in Hawaii. It was a horrible time of my life. Doesn't that sound terrible? Her husband was stationed there at Kaneohe Base as a Marine, and he was out on float, and I got to go for 5 or 6 weeks to just hang out on all these different islands. She had military passes everywhere, and so we got in cheap, and it was a great time, just my sister and I hanging out. And one of the things I decided to do was take a scuba diving class. I got my scuba license in Hawaii. Again, I've lived a horrible life. And we learned in a swimming pool, which seems ironic when we're positioned right in the middle of the Pacific. But we learned in a swimming pool, but I remember the day we were finally making our first dive in open water. We drove in the bus. Our instructor, a female instructor, her husband was driving the bus. Eric Clapton's Layla was blasting the whole way. We were pumped. We were ready to go. I was in a van full of 20-something-year-old Marines looking like me. Because it was on a Marine base. So needless to say, they all felt a little insecure around me. So we were in the bus, we were going, we unloaded all of the gear, and over Eric Clapton's, I think Layla had quit. At that point, I think it was probably cocaine that was playing, but that's a different story. But over the loud radio, she says, "Oh, I forgot. At one point in our dive, we're going to encounter something called a rip current." She had not talked about this. We're strapping on gear as we're getting ready to wade in the water, and this was the first time we had heard about this rip current. We didn't know what it meant, but she explained very briefly what would happen is that it is a very strong current, and she says, if you get caught in this current, don't fight it. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. And it'll take you out just a few hundred yards. Just, she said. It'll take you out just a few hundred yards. Don't fight it. I will come and get you. Don't panic. So we get in the water, and at the time I was thinking, this sounds fun. I may accidentally get caught in the rip current. So we go, we're doing the dive. We come to the lowest part of our dive, about 60 feet. I think that's where my license at the time allowed me to go. And so we got there, and here's what I learned about rip currents. There were 2 rock formations growing with coral underwater. And they were in one line, but there was a gap in the middle. And what I didn't realize is even underwater, you feel the surge of the ocean. What you see on top, you feel under the water. And so we were down there, and you learn to swim through that. And we come to this, and what would happen is as the ocean would surge, it would come around that wall, but then as it would surge out, that water would shoot like a jet down that middle opening. And I didn't understand any of this, and we were in a line waiting to cross this underwater, one diver at a time. And my turn came, and I thought, here we go. The accident of getting caught. And I remember coming to that opening. We were wearing what is called a BCD, a buoyancy control device. It's a vest that you fill with air from your tanks, and it keeps you buoyant at different depths underwater. And so I came out there, and that opening, I remember turning and looking. And I saw instantly the ocean floor drop away, and it was black. And I looked out, and I saw the whole Pacific Ocean. And it was that dark, almost black kind of blue. And I saw nothing, and in my head, I heard dun-dun, 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 right? That's what I heard. Or I started replaying Jonah's story, or, I mean, all of this was going on, and I'm terrified of water. Why did I get a scuba license? I don't know, but I'm terrified. And I remember looking out there and seeing this abyss. And then I felt the current on my tanks. It felt like someone had tied a rope onto them and was yanking, yanking, yanking. You know what I did? I let all of the air out of my BCD. And I crawled in sand across that opening, too afraid to get caught in that current, remembering what she had said. And I admit, in hindsight, I wonder what I missed. I wonder what I missed. Because in that moment, if I had gotten caught in that, I was not in control. But staying in control meant I missed out on the ocean. So we come to this story today. Jesus is on the shore of the Lake of Gennesaret, part of the Galilean region. And it says the crowds are pressing in. Some notoriety. Jesus is gaining some notoriety. People know him, and the crowds are beginning to assemble, and they're pressing in. He's right there. They can see him. They can touch him. They can see facial expressions. Now, in reading this passage, there are some logistical things that do matter. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but how this area is formed naturally is with the cliff faces behind that kind of form a natural amphitheater. So as Jesus was standing on the shore, with the crowd above him, in a sense, you know how shorelines rise at first. So as he's standing on the shore and the crowds get closer and closer and closer, the sound, if you can imagine, the sound coming out of his mouth doesn't go as far as it needs to. It falls shorter and shorter and shorter. So there was an ancient trick, and this was well known. In this region, if you get in a boat and you go out just 20, 30, maybe 40 feet, then the flat surface of the water and the sheer cliff walls allow you to speak in a normal voice and provide amazing amplification. If you've ever been to the Capitol building and stood in the rotunda, that vast cavernous space, and you know, if you stand on one end and you have a normal conversation, even a whispered conversation, it's heard all the way over at the other end. It forms this natural amplification. This sort of thing was happening in this place. And I guess that's important. It's important, I guess, logistically speaking. But I think there's something more important in the passage for us than just the mechanics of why Jesus got into the boat. I want to look at this kind of like a mystic. I want to look at this in a way that says, what is the truth behind the true story that speaks to us, that speaks to me? And here's what I saw. I saw a crowd of people standing on the shore wanting to get close to Jesus, thinking that they could control him. We've talked a lot about this the last couple of weeks. He's close. He's touchable. He's there. The crowd is bigger than the person. He's very much in control. The shores where God is safe, where faith is predictable, where change is small, where nets are repaired, where boats are fixed, where fish are filleted. The shores. Jesus gets into the boat and he teaches from this boat. Of course, the natural amplification, but here's what is amazing in the story for me, is what is not present in the story. Usually when it says Jesus spoke or Jesus taught, we then get a lesson plan. We get a sermon. We find out what he said. But in here it just said he was teaching. We don't know what he said. It's almost as if the message he was speaking on was irrelevant to the story that Luke is telling us. It's not the lesson that mattered. It's the actions of everybody around. So you have this crowd, and here's Jesus. We find out Jesus has gotten in Simon's boat. Simon and his friends, James and John. James and John were brothers, the sons of thunder, sons of Zebedee. And they were partners together with Simon. Maybe it was a local business. They were fishermen. And they had been fishing all night long. All night long. And that's when the right time to fish was for the catch that they were going for. And so they were up on shore. They were repairing and cleaning their nets. They were probably, the boats were turned upside down, maybe. I don't know. But they were there. They were done for the day. They were finishing up their day's work. And Jesus says, hey, let me jump in one of your boats. Take me out a little bit. And I'll speak from there. So this happens. It's Simon Peter's boat. He finishes speaking. Then Jesus says these words. Take me out to the deep waters and let down your nets. The deep waters. Take me out there. It's interesting. In the Greek, there is a word for deep waters, like the deep end of a swimming pool, or even swimming in the ocean. It's 60 feet underwater, or it's 1,000 feet underwater. There is a Greek word that designates a depth that is quantifiable. But the Greek word in this instance speaks of a depth that is not quantifiable. It's the kind of depth we see when we go all the way back to Genesis, where it says that God's Spirit was hovering over the surface of the deep. This uncontrolled, chaotic, unfathomable deepness. That's the word that's used. There are better words, but Jesus uses that word. Take me out where you don't have any knowledge. Take me out to that place where you can't tell me what's on the bottom. Take me out to that spot where you don't think fish swim. Take me out to the deep and let down your nets. Of course, Peter is a fisherman. Jesus is a carpenter. So Peter says, we've been fishing all night for these fish at the right time when you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to do it at this time of the day. But because you say so, maybe Jesus preached a good message. Because you say so, I will do it. And you heard the story. They let down their nets, or Peter lets down his net, and it begins to fill up. So he waves his buddies over, and here comes James and John, and they let down their nets. They start hauling in these fish, hauling them in, hauling them in, hauling them in. And pretty soon they have so much fish, their boats are sinking. And Peter, I don't know if he did this in the boat or he did this when they came back to shore, but he falls down in front of Jesus. And he says, get away from me. I'm sinful. He recognized something in that moment. And here is Jesus' response. Do not be afraid. Isn't that interesting? They were counting fish at this point. They had had a great day of fishing. They were joyful, I would imagine. But Jesus says, do not be afraid. What was there to be afraid of? Something out of control had happened. Something they couldn't quantify. Something they couldn't define. Do not be afraid. And then here's what he says. I will make you fishers of people, fishers of men. You're going to do the same thing. You're just going to do it different. Remember how you fished in the deep, that chaos? Remember how you went to that place of uncontrolled, unknowable, that depth that you can't define? Remember that? You're going to do this now on land. And you're going to do this by following me. I was reading a book this week. It's a man by the name of David Bentley Hart. Don't buy the book. It's a hard read. I'm not recommending it. It's a good read, but I'm not recommending it because one page takes me 10 minutes. It's hard reading. But at the end of a chapter, here's what he writes. He says, my chief desire is to show that what is most mysterious and most exalted is also that which, strangely enough, turns out to be most ordinary and nearest at hand. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Take what you know, take what you've been doing, but now we're going to do it in the deep end. I don't know about you, but I long for the deep. I find myself as a theologian, as a pastor, sometimes as a scholar, as a student, I find myself coming up to the shore trying to get very close to Jesus, to learn what I can about Jesus, to hear what he has to say, to get as close as I can. But here's what I find in those moments, and it's very frustrating. It seems like God withdraws from my presence. You ever felt that? Those moments when you're seeking, those moments when you want more, and it seems like God withdraws, like in a boat from the crowd. God withdraws, never out of sight, but sometimes out of reach. God withdraws. Now, his withdrawing comes with a benefit. His message becomes broadly scattered. And so there is a benefit to his withdrawal, but, and this is not in the passage, but maybe this comes with experience, yours and mine, but sometimes I find where God withdraws just a little bit, it draws me closer. I end up finding I'm wading out into the water. I've been on the shore. I've been content on the shore. There it's controlled. There it's safe. But very soon I find myself wading into the water. At some point, I find myself maybe in a boat, alone with Jesus, terrified, because we're in a part of my life that I have never been, and it remains unexplored, and it's chaotic, and it's uncontrolled, and it's dangerous. And God says, stop and let down your nets here. Here's the spot. And something amazing happens. Something uncontrolled, something miraculous, something remarkable. And there's still danger in this, make no mistake. There is still risk in the sense that sometimes God's presence in our life feels so heavy, it makes our life want to sink like the boats. His blessings are poured on, or the weight of his glory. Did you know the Hebrew word for glory means weight? Kabod. Kabod. It means weight. This is what glory is. And sometimes, like Peter, the weight of God's glory just wants to crush us. And we hear, do not be afraid. Why would Jesus say that? Because we've been terrified. It's safe on the shore. It's safe where Jesus is easily seen, easily understood. It's safe in the Bible study. It's safe on a Sunday morning here in a sermon. It's safe when I get to my favorite online preachers. It's safe when I'm alone by myself with my Bible. It's safe in these spots that I've always known. It's safe to give the right answers. It's safe to reaffirm the answers I've always known. It's safe. And that's where we want to be. And so this fear wells up in us, because if we go too far into that deep, it might consume us. We might get lost. But I think there is a blessing and a benefit in being lost. Because apart from being lost, we will never be found. Yeah. Apart from being dead, we will never be raised. I see Jesus' love in this story kind of like a rip current tugging at us, pulling us to go into that uncontrolled space, that space of unknowing. Oh, we like knowing what we know, don't we? We like when we come with a question. We like turning into our Bibles and quoting a verse. We like these things, and these things are good, and they're necessary. But can I tell you, there are things in life that have no answer. Whether they are in our Bibles, in our minds, in popular discourse, on the internet, on the news. There are things in life that have no answer. The only answer is to be consumed by the vastness of God's presence. You know, Everything you need to know about salvation is contained here. It is. But everything you need to know about God is not contained here. God is bigger than this book. He's so much more. And I'm not saying get out of your Bible. I'm not saying stop reading Scripture. I'm saying the exact opposite. That this needs to be mastered, but there comes a point in our life when mastery is not control over the text, but allowing the text to control us. It's swimming in the deep end and finding you didn't know how to swim at all and drowning in the love of God. This is that unknown, that unquantifiable, that unutterable angst in our soul. And like some of you, I find myself at the shore of certainty. Right there, seeing it, wanting it, but afraid of it. Isn't it amazing? When God hides God's presence, it always comes with fear. Think of the mountain in Exodus, where God descended before the Israelites and was clothed in a cloud of fire and lightning and a storm. And even the Israelites were told, don't touch the mountain. Don't touch. There are limits. You're not ready. It's going to kill you. It's going to kill you. But Moses was invited into the cloud of unknowing, into the uncertainty. And it was so uncertain, and he was up there so long that even the Israelites thought he had died. Maybe in a sense he did. But he went into the cloud, and the cloud consumed him. And what he saw, what he heard so overwhelmed him that he only had one request of God. Show me your glory. He stepped into the cloud of unknowing and wanted more. I want more. I want more. I'm tired of being content on the shore. I'm tired of repairing my nets. I'm tired of going out night after night into the waters I'm familiar with, doing the things I'm familiar with. I want more. There's a story I heard. I think Nick Eady told me the story, so I'll probably tell it wrong. But it's of a bunch of recruiters coming and presenting to a room full of young people why they should sign on the dotted line for their particular, the branch of the armed forces that they represent. So Air Force, Navy, Army, and Marines. Maybe there was Coast Guard there. I don't know. But here they were. They were presenting, and each of them got up, and one after the other, and said, why? Why you should join the Army, why you should join the Navy, why you should join the Air Force. And they gave their spiels. They were each allowed it, 5-10 minutes, whatever it was. And they gave their spiels. And the Marine recruiter got up there, and here was his spiel. He looked there, he stood silently, he looked at the room, and he said, most of you can't be Marines. And he got down. Guess whose recruiting line was longest? And I stand here today because for some of you, this message, you're like, what is this? This feels flimsy and mamby-pamby. It's ethereal, and there's nothing concrete here. What is this? And I want to say, this message is not for everyone. Because some of you won't ever leave the shores. Because that's where you're most content, or at least that's what you think. But there's something in this for some of you here today. Because there is a deep calling to you that the deep emptiness in your heart is drawn to. And there is a point in your life when you've got to wade out. You've got to go into the deep. You've got to be caught in that current, and you've got to be carried away in the extravagance of who God is. Call it what you will. Call it salvation. Salvation through death. Call it what you will. Call it sanctification. Sanctification by finally coming alive. Call it what you will. Call it uncontrolled. Call it terrifying. I call it God. And there's something in this that wants to carry us away, something in us that wants us to throw up our hands, something in us that wants us to not deflate the BCD that we're wearing, that keeps us right in place, something that wants to get us caught in that current and take us out where there is no floor, where there is no end, where there is only the infinity of who God is. I want to get caught in that, but here's what's amazing, is once we go into the deep, we are then called back to the shore. But you know, once you've been in the deep, the shore is not quite the same. Have you ever had that experience? You've tasted something, and it's not quite the same. It's like playing board games with our nerds here in the church. They play intense board games. I used to be content with Monopoly and Risk and those things that just roll the dice and yeah, there's some strategy, but in the end, it's mostly just luck of the draw. Then I started playing games with my nerds. And all of a sudden, I don't have a taste for lesser things. It's kind of trivial. It's kind of small. It's kind of tedious. And this happens with our spiritual lives as well. We've gotten a taste of the deep, yet we're called back to shore. And what a frustrating thing that is. Because we don't want to be there. We want to be in that depth. But here's what Jesus says to Peter. Yes, we're coming back to shore. But notice, I'm not taking anything away from you. We're actually going to take the deep and implant it in you. And now you are going to become the deep going into the world. The deep calling to deep. The depth of God resides in you because you reside in the depths of God. But now you go to a world and there's these moments when you get so frustrated. It's like coming back from a mission trip. If you've ever experienced this, if you haven't, talk to me immediately after the service. Guatemala is in 6 weeks. But it's like going on a mission trip. It's so frustrating for those that have been because they come back full to the brim of things that they've seen, experiences they've had, moments that are impossible to explain. And so in our excitement, we try to explain it. In our excitement, we show you the pictures. And I've sat in those slideshows and I've thought, here we go. Another picture of a starving child with a white bearded man. Right? I've thought those thoughts. I've seen those pictures. They all look the same. But those pictures that we're showing to you actually mean more to us. And we're just trying to convey what is impossible to explain. So you've experienced this frustration. And this is the task. And it's frustrating because you're going to go into a world that you're going to get blank looks at or looks from. They're not going to get it. And it's going to frustrate you because you want them to want what you want so desperately. And in wanting it for them, you find you want it for yourself more and more. So what does all of this boil down to? What does this mean in practical application? Let me challenge you this morning. This message is not for everyone. Most of you don't even understand it. But some of you right now, God is speaking to. Some of you right now, God is saying something like, maybe I've called you to pastor a church. Maybe someone right now is saying, God is saying to someone right now, you need to go to Guatemala. Maybe God is saying to someone right now, that job is not where you're supposed to be. Maybe God is saying to someone right now, the way you've been doing it, you need to stop doing it. Maybe God is saying to someone right now, your Sunday school and simple answers are not enough. You need more. This is what God is calling us to. This is it's what takes my breath away. It's what I want. It's what I long for. It's what I pant for. And I say this with emotion and passion right now. And come Monday morning, I'll probably find myself back on the shore. So here's the challenge today. Here's the question. Will you be caught up in the unknown? Will you allow that current to rip you into places that you've never been? Will you move into the impossible? Because God says, I am making you into fishers of men. Will you do what is incredible? Not because it makes sense, like Peter in the boat, not because you know how it's done, not because you're qualified, but will you do what is impossible because God says so? Let down your nets. But Lord, we fished all night. This is what God is calling. This is what vocation means. This is what calling is. And this is where the deep resides. So here it is today. It's deep calling to deep. From the shores to the deep. Where will you live? We come to a point in our service, and I feel like in a moment we need to pray, because I've given you a choice. I've given you a decision to make. It's not for everyone, and I know that. I know that. But the question today is, what will you do when you feel that tug? Like the tug on my tanks. What will you do when you feel that tug?